Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I start by paying tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Kensington and Bayswater, who is the voice of his community, and he's given a moving tribute today. As we've heard, it's now been more than 7 years since 72 people lost their lives in the devastating fire in Grenfell Tower. Our thoughts are with the bereaved families, the survivors, the residents and the local community. That this tragic fire happened in modern Britain is a scandal, and it should fill us all with deep anger and fear. Every single person was let down by failure of almost every single institution that existed to serve them, and decades of failure by the state. My honourable friend for Vauxhall and Camberwell spoke powerfully of the moment she first saw the tragedy. I'll never forget as I saw those images. I travelled past not even 48 hours after. The embers, the smoke, the smell, that memory will stay with me forever. The Grenfell community has demonstrated enormous strength and courage in giving evidence to the inquiry, and they've campaigned tirelessly for justice. Justice for the victims and the families of Grenfell Tower, and justice so that this tragedy can never befall another community. Madam Deputy Speaker, in my constituency of Stratford and Bow, we sit between the boroughs that have the highest number of high-rise cladded blocks in the country. There are over 400 buildings with unsafe cladding in Tower Hamlets and over 200 in Newham. I welcome that the Deputy Prime Minister said today that Tower Hamlets was the first to obtain a remediation order. But there is still so much more to be done. This means in my constituency there are thousands of residents who, through no fault of their own, have found themselves caught up in a cladding scandal. I've been inundated by my constituents contacting me about feeling unsafe in their own homes. I've sat with them as they've told me deeply personal stories, through tears and anger. Unable to move, to be with their dying mother, who's dying of cancer, the impact on their mental health, unable to start a family, stuck in homes where their life savings are trapped in unmortgageable properties. The sheer scale of anger and distrust and betrayal in these circumstances, through no fault of their own, that my constituents feel sits heavily with me. I share their frustration, and I know it's a frustration I can feel around this House today. A frustration at the pace of the remediation works. These works are already long overdue, and for many, they still feel years away. It's shameful that 7 years after Grenfell, remediation has been completed on less than 50% of mid and high-rise buildings with unsafe cladding. We've seen recently terrifying fire in Dagenham. That's why residents around the country, it's why residents in Stratford and Bow are living in fear of what happens to them in the event of a fire. But this is not the end of it, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many leaseholders, including shared owners, feel trapped in properties they're unable to sell, facing significant financial uncertainty and distress. In my constituency, residents in East Village, the site of the former athletes' village from the Olympics, in Olympic Park, have been left in a protracted legal battle between different stakeholders over who is liable for remediation costs and delaying essential works. Residents of Thomas Fire Drive are still waiting for works to start, despite their service charges going up, with some stuck in the leasehold trap because they can't sell their property. Many feel that saving face and saving cost has been prioritised over their safety. The distress and frustration is palpable, and the situation is becoming untenable for many. I know the government shares my view that every person deserves to feel safe and be safe and secure in the place they live and call home. Sadly, for too many of my constituents and too many constituents of members around this House and around the country, they fear the victims of being yet another Grenfell-level style tragedy, and it remains ever present. I'll finish by asking if the Minister will meet with me to discuss the cases in my constituency, because we do have the highest number of high-rise cladded blocks in the country. I acknowledge that the Minister has inherited a shameful situation from the previous government, and it's completely scandalous that the remediation was so slow. I welcome the work that this Labour government is taking to put it right. In particular, today's announcement that for the first time commits to remediating all high-rise buildings with unsafe cladding in a government-funded scheme by 2029. And I'm pleased that the Deputy Prime Minister said today that we want to go much further. At the election, we made a promise that we would speed up the removal of unsafe cladding. Madam Deputy Speaker, today we are acting on that promise. But too many leaseholders in my constituency have had to pay the price of removal of unsafe cladding that they had no role in putting up. I welcome the reforms today for renters, giving tenants a seat at the table, and to the Speaker of Social Housing. But I would urge the Minister to make sure that the cost of remediation does not fall on leaseholders, and that we do take into account all the views and give everybody a seat at the table. When we say never again, we truly must mean it, Madam Deputy Speaker. We must act to learn the lessons so that another Grenfell tragedy can never again be repeated. I join colleagues on these benches and urge the Government to act on the findings of the Phase 2 report in full and address the inequalities in housing. The inequalities that we see through class, through race, through disability. There is still so much more to be done, and I welcome us working together so that this never again happens.